My name is Dr. G. Welcome to That's Unusual, my podcast uncovering the unusual stories behind the world's most interesting people. On this show, we celebrate what makes us different and how we convert those differences into unexpected opportunities. Welcome to this week's episode of That's Unusual. I'm just absolutely amazed to see each week the growth of our subscriber base for this podcast. You know, if you haven't done so yet, please be sure to subscribe to That's Unusual on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher so you don't miss an episode. We've all heard of the infamous Tupper Ware parties, but have you heard of the CPR Party? My next guest is Laura Metro, who was inspired to create the popular CPR Party originating from a near-death drowning incident of her own son. Turning adversity into opportunity, she imagines a world where every neighbor is empowered to become a citizen paramedic. One house at a time, she is democratizing access to affordable CPR training with the hope that no one ever has to suffer the hardship she endured with her son. On this episode, Laura shares with us the horrifying moment of almost losing her son to a preventable drowning incident, what sparked her to create CPR Party, and why she believes CPR training is a global imperative. As you listen to this episode, I ask that you reflect on your own unusual stories and unique qualities that can help open doors to unexpected opportunities. And so with that, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of That's Unusual. My guest today is Laura Metro. Welcome to the show, Laura.
Hi there. Welcome. Thanks for having me.
So, it's a delight to have you on. In fact, I think this is probably one of the most important episodes that will be recorded to date. Not just because you're a very special person and we share almost the same birthday. I think we're just 3 days apart,
Yes.
which is... so you're a fellow Pisces,
My Pisces brother, yeah.
But at the same time, I think you have a message that I think the world needs to hear, and I think it's not talked about enough. And I want to get into that, and I want you to tell your story around that, amongst many other things. Excellent. So you are, and of course, you know, the bio's on our website. You are the founder of CPR Party, but this was not just some sort of idea that sprung in your head. On June 18th, 2011, you had a moment in your life that was a real scare. And that's sort of, understating it. Can you, if you're comfortable, could you talk about that day and that experience and what happened?
Sure. So as you said, it was June 18th, and let me hear this going here. My apologies. And we were at the Delaware shore with some other friends and their two children and our two children. That morning, my friend overheard my husband and I having a conversation about who was going to take my father's big dog running. Mm-hmm. So I said I'll go running. She said, you know what, guys, why don't you just both of you take the dog running? We'll take the kids to the pool. We'll see you in, 45 minutes to an hour. Great. So my husband and I go along about our run with the dog, and then we are sort of on our cool down and taking the right turn into my father's neighborhood, where my daughter comes. She was 6 at the time. Comes running out of the pool. It's a community pool for his neighborhood. It says, mm-hmm. I think Clay died. I had no idea what she was saying. In fact, at the time, she was really, really obsessed with butterflies. So I sort of made this assumption in my brain that she was she was really excited about a butterfly. Then our friend came out and she started screaming, drop the dog, run. And I think we've all been in a situation, where with a child or someone, there's a certain pitch or scream and something is severely, severely wrong. Mm-hmm. So we took off and ran into the pool, and that's where we saw my son. He was on the concrete outside by the pool, and he was blue and lifeless, and our friend was trying to do CPR on him. And the details around that are slightly blurry, but basically I started screaming for a doctor. My husband at one point picked up my son and was sort of shaking him. There was probably about maybe 5 to 10 other people who were at the pool. And there was a man that sort of took it upon himself to kind of be a coach to our friend who was trying to do CPR. So he actually took my son back from my husband, put him back on the ground, and they continued this. At this point, our friend had ushered her 2 girls and my daughter, Mason, back into the house. At some point in there, the paramedics did arrive. They intubated Clay on the scene. They did use the AED. They shot epinephrine. And then they also, which was totally a maverick move, started hypothermia treatment. At this point, they said we were going to have to leave. I ran back into the house and I went to my daughter and she said, "Is Clay dead?" And I said, "He is not dead. They are helping him to stay alive. They're breathing for him. And, but he's very sick." And I put her hands in my face and I just told her I loved her. And then they started yelling for me to come out. So I ran back out. I got in the ambulance. They took me to the firehouse where the helicopter met me, and we were medevaced from from Delaware, the Delaware Shore, to a children's hospital in Wilmington, Delaware, AI DuPont Children's Hospital. And after that, we can get into different details about, certain points of the experience. But Clay was then, again, they did hypothermia treatment throughout the evening. He was in a coma for 2 days and then woke to make nothing short of a complete and total miraculous recovery.
Wow. I mean, I every time I hear the story, I just get shivers down my back. It's just a scary story. So tell me, so Clay was in the hospital or the intensive care unit for a couple of days. When he woke up, what was that moment like?
We were the night before, they had told us that they were going to try to wake him up the next day. And in fact, the nurses said, "You need to go back to Ronald McDonald House. So you need to go and get rest because, if this goes as we hope it will go, you guys you're going to need some rest to deal with this." So we did. And I remember this nurse so well. She said, "I'm going to take him to the spa." And so she said she was going to give him a bath and she was, going to help him. And he's, in a coma. And so we felt comfortable at that point and we were exhausted. We literally had not slept in 2 days. And we went to sleep, came back the next day and they, kind of said, "Hey, this is going to be a long process." And at this point, we had a number of friends, some best friends who had joined us at the hospital, sort of sitting vigil with us. So we went downstairs to eat some lunch together. Of course, that's the moment that we get the urgent call that he's starting to wake. And we just dropped everything and everyone's like, "Go, go, go." And we just ran up to the room and slowly but surely everyone, our friends, came into the room as well. So we were all sort of in a U shape around his bed, my husband and I at the top of the U. And we're looking at him and he's kind of groggy and he's sort of looking around and I look up and I'm like, I don't know if he knows who I am. And one of my husband's best friends just goes, "Clay, do you see mommy?" And Clay just turns, looks right up into me and everybody lost it. I mean, it was very clear that he knew it was me. And we all just, it was like I literally had not taken a breath in days. And it was just, complete emotional release. We didn't know at this point what we were dealing with, but it was enough of a sign of hope that, he did in fact recognize who I was at that moment that, I wouldn't say we thought we were out of the blue, but we definitely were hopeful.
Wow, what an emotional moment in time. Those couple of days where things were somewhat unknown with Clay, and I'm sure you probably tried to replay that day, that moment over and over again, right? I mean, every potential scenario, should we not have taken the dog? Should we not have gone for a walk? What if this, what if that? I mean, can you paint for us, if you can recall, what was going through your head over those couple of days as you sort of repainted that scene?
Yeah, I actually didn't feel that way. I I was, of course, upset by what was going on, but I did not feel blame. For example, when my husband had to drive to the hospital, which was 2 hours away, and when he finally got there, we kind of had a moment, and I looked at him and I said, "You don't blame them, do you?" And he said, "No," and I said, "Neither do I." I mean, with our friends who are watching our kids, there was never a moment. Now, if this, God forbid, it turned out differently, would I say something different? I don't think I would, but we never, even in those moments, blame them because it truly, truly was an accident.
Hmm.
He was
Were you angry? I mean,
no,
what happened? What happened during that course of? I mean, and all it takes is a couple of minutes, right? I mean, was there
no, it's
something
not
that
minutes, it's
was
seconds.
seconds? Yeah. I mean, what happened during that moment? Was that
Um,
ever described to you?
yeah, we basically the pool is an L-shaped pool, and then there's sort of a pool house right in the 90-degree angle, say, of the L, and then a fence around it. And Clay was over with my friend at the shallow end, and her husband was sitting on the lounges by the deep end with my daughter and his two girls having a snack. And Clay said, "I'm going to go over there and have a snack." So she says, "Fine." So he walks over to have a snack. At this point, the girls say, "This is the queen's corner. You need to go back to the king's corner." So he's like, "Okay, whatever." So he, at this point, is where it's blurry, but we believe he took my daughter's towel. We believe he tripped on the towel and fell into the deep end because he was found
Hmm.
at the bottom with the towel.
Ah.
And so it wasn't negligent. He was walking back to the other friend, and, you know, since this accident, obviously I've learned a lot about drowning. Uh, you know, I always attribute this to 9/11. So at 9/11, when all the planes stopped, is when we all noticed the quiet in the air.
Hmm.
We had all been completely conditioned to hear planes, especially in DC on the flight path, all the time. It's the same thing when you're by a pool. You're conditioned to hear splashes.
Hmm.
You're not going to notice a splash. And with drowning is silent. It's not like the movie Jaws. That's not what happens. People don't flail around and scream. They silently sink under, and that's
Hmm.
it. So how this could happen is pretty easy to visualize. And again, as I became more and more obsessed with learning about CPR and drowning, I saw that not only was this, you know, one of the fastest ways to die, but that it was happening all over the country and it was happening to good people, responsible parents, just like our friends were. There was nothing irresponsible about anything that went on at all. Um, and it was truly, truly in its essence an accident. So during those 2 days of the coma, at one point that evening, I took a picture of Clay in the coma, um, and I did that because I had a moment where I profoundly understood what was important in life. Um, and whether that was my own emotional state at the time, or we live in the same type of area. There's a lot of competition in this area for all kinds of things, and I remember just this moment of saying to myself, like, it's all clear. The only thing that matters in life is the health of your family and friends. That's it. My
Hmm.
checkbook could be as filled as Bill Gates, okay? Or, I could have everything you could possibly want from the material sense, but none of it truly matters if you don't have the people that you love with you. You can't enjoy your world and your life no matter what you seek. And I felt so clear in that moment, um, and focused on all of that more than ever in my life. And that's why I took the picture, because I never, ever wanted to forget that moment. I never wanted to go back and kind of say, whew, that was rough, but it's over now. I
Hmm.
never had the desire. I always wanted to remember what that moment was like, because in a very strange way, it was almost crystal. It was freeing to say, this is it. This is the answer, and what are we all searching for, right? Happiness. What am I supposed to do with my life? Where am I going to, that was it. It was all right there. Very clear as day for me, what my life was about and what I stood for and what was important. And I always wanted to remember that moment in time.
That's really powerful, because it's oftentimes, when something bad happens, we tend to put it away, tuck it aside and forget about it over the course of time. But you want it front and center, because this is such an important thing that you don't want others to feel. And no parent should ever, it's the worst nightmare, to see your child, suffer or at worst pass away. And there's something that just sort of hits us, in our bones when something like, even when a small cut happens, right? I can only imagine what it's like, on the brink of death, in seeing your child do that. Mm-hmm. But most parents don't think about this, right? Like you talked about that notion of drowning being a silent killer. There's such a myth around how people drown and we expect screaming and so forth. But when you're underwater, you're not screaming. I mean, it is very silent and it can go very unnoticed. And I think they've even done some public studies from what I've seen in public pools, because there's almost so many screams and loud noises and people playing in the pool that even in a community pool where you think so many people are watching, the chances of drowning and being very silent and going unnoticed is really, really high. And I think, you sort of getting that, front and center and getting people aware of that is extremely, extremely important.
Thank you.
So that day, it wasn't just a day or an experience in your life. It changed what you did from that moment on. So can you tell us a little? Well, first of all, actually, before that, how's Clay doing today?
Clay is doing great. We do have some residual things that we're dealing with now that are sort of, they've been coming up the past couple of years, but are really coming front and center right now from a neurological standpoint. The bottom line is, in the hospital, the doctor said, listen, he knows who you are. He knows who he is. He knows who SpongeBob is. We have the basics covered here. He said, will he have some learning issues? Will he, most likely yes, but, the bottom line was, obviously our perspective was in a very different place. In terms of learning and things like that, we're dealing with a lot of that now. And also, really trying to determine what is actually neurological and from the accident and what may have been there before, and kind of trying to, navigate that scenario and figure that out from a behavior standpoint and a learning standpoint. But all in all, he is a great, thriving little boy, and life is great for him.
And how old is he now?
He's 9.
He's 9.
And he's March 14th, so he's also a Pisces.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I knew I loved the Metro family
That's
for some
right.
good reason. So what, do you talk to him about it? Is he aware? Is this an open conversation that you have with him?
Completely open. We really don't think he remembers any of it. He knows that he drowned from all of it. He knows the story.
He's seen the pictures?
He knows everything, but he really, we don't seem to have a recollection from him. And even afterwards, I did a little bit of research on sort of, the signs of near-death incidences and things like that. He didn't have anything like that. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it seems as though he sort of fell asleep for a couple of days and woke up and got a lot of toys, and he remembers watching Nemo in the hospital. And I mean, really, for him, he was the least affected from an emotional standpoint of all of this.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that moment on, you changed your whole perspective on life, and you made it your life's mission to essentially try to prevent this from happening to anyone else. So what did you do next? I mean, there's a couple of ways you could address it, is looking at, getting people to, encourage learning how to swim, which could be one way, but you focused on CPR at some point. But even before that, I'm sure you sort of went through sort of a mental process and trying to figure out, how do I prevent this from happening to other families? So what was that process like?
Well, I'd say there was 2 moments. The first moment, and this one took me a while to really wrap my head around, but when I was in the helicopter for 30 minutes, one, I'm not the biggest fan of flying. And I realized somewhere across, over the Atlantic Ocean, when I told myself, be where your feet are. And I looked down at my feet and the bottom was plexiglass. And that's when I said to myself, oh my God, excuse my language, I am in a fucking paper plane over the ocean. Okay. Is what I literally said to myself. I was like, oh my God. Was when I realized I was actually in a helicopter. And at that point, I had on headphones, and so I could hear the paramedics in the back. I had no access to them, but they said that Clay was going into cardiac arrest.
Ugh.
So I looked at the pilot and I said, can you turn these off? And he clicked a switch and turned them off. And then I said, how much time? And he pointed to a clock that was counting down. It was 14 minutes and 23 seconds. And that was the amount of time left before we landed. Mm-hmm. And I wanted, the reason I asked him to do that was because I had a moment where I just wanted to jump. Mm-hmm. I was, the pain, what was happening to me, the only way I can describe it was that it was just unnatural. It felt like a human being shouldn't have to experience this level of pain and desperation that I was experiencing in that moment. And I needed to figure out how to take care of myself so I could get through this helicopter ride. And that's when I asked him to turn it off. And then I told myself, the last time you saw him, they were keeping him alive and he was alive. And you have to tell yourself that he is alive. Because I started having visions of walking into his bedroom after he had died. And that's when that feeling of wanting to jump came. And I said, no, be in this moment right now. And as far as you know, he's alive and they're keeping him alive. And you have to stay here until you land. And then I probably was rocking, I think, because then I literally just said for the next 14 minutes straight in my head, he's going to be okay. He's going to be okay. He's going to be okay. And I wanted to put that out into the world because I'd had somebody, a good friend of mine who was very into spirituality at one point was like, what, you need to, this is weeks prior, which is ironic. She said, you need to put out in the world really what you want and it'll come back to you. And so I was like, I'm putting it out there. And I said, he's going to be okay. He's going to be okay. And we landed. So fast forward, we're home. He's home. He's on a heart monitor, everything for, from what we think is, going to be okay. And I was standing in my driveway and I had this just almost sense of heaviness come over me. And I thought to myself, how the hell am I going to ever let my kids out of the house? Because the way that I describe kind of having an incident like this is that we as parents and as people, and in many ways, walk around with a certain degree of denial every day. If we didn't, we would all be complete lunatics and would need to be highly medicated at all times. Okay. Look, there are accidents that happen every single day, as we know, but we do all protect ourselves by, it's not going to happen to me. Or it's not going to happen to my kids. And there's a certain part of that is very healthy. And you should do that. You should operate, especially post 9/11. You should operate in that way. You cannot be afraid every day. So I said to myself, oh my God, if the worst happened, how could I make it okay? How could I live? Because when something like this happens to your child, you no longer have that comfortable state of denial. You are now walking around raw and aware of exactly the realities of life. So you don't have the option anymore to be in a comfortable state of denial. So I said, I just have to have no regrets. My children, no matter what happens during the day, I need to say good night to them and tell them I love them. They just need to know I love them. And I need to give 100%. I need to continue every day because if they died, I need to be able to say to myself, I know they know I love them and I know I did everything I could, whatever that means. Mm-hmm. That is the only thing I could think of that would allow me to, and again, basically, to not sugarcoat it, allow me, if one of my children died, to not kill myself. because that is the amount of pain that one is suffering from in these situations. And I don't want to do that, nor did I want to do that at all. So what was going to make it okay? And that's where that's where I believe the foundation was born in that moment, which was not only the concept of sort of no regrets and just do what life is calling you to do, but two, that I never wanted any other human being to ever experience what we experienced, ever. It was not okay. It was not right. And it's completely preventable. So if there was anything I could do to help another parent not have to experience that, I wanted to do that. And I also later on felt very strongly, and I would consider myself not a religious person, but I would consider myself more of a spiritual person. Mm-hmm. I do practice religion, but I see things in a lot of different ways. But I also felt I felt as though it was not a coincidence that this happened to me, and that Clay lived. That it was now my responsibility to the world or the universe, whatever it may be, to then do this work. I had a public relations and marketing background professionally. I live 5 miles outside of Washington, D.C., which pretty much everybody and their brother has an office in Washington, D.C. I mean, I said to myself, this is what I'm supposed to do. So that is really where this was all born and how this all sort of came about.
Incredible story. So tell me more about CPR Party. This is something that you conceived as a way to deliver on the purpose that you recognized over time, and putting all of the pieces together in terms of your background as a PR specialist and expert, and having gone through this experience and the vicinity in which you live in. Tell us about CPR Party.
Well, like I said, I've given you the background on it. I became, one of the things that occurred too was that I became sort of, I still haven't found the right word, but obsessed with why I didn't know CPR. I thought to myself, I'm a responsible, woman. I'm a college educated woman in an urban area. Most people would say I was a neurotic safety person before the accident. Yes. And I could rival a car seat installation with, any fireman in town. You just, if any fireman ever hears that, I'm happy to, do a car seat installation competition. But, I was just really intrigued with why didn't I know CPR? So I really looked very deeply into it. And the bottom line is that people didn't know CPR because of money and time. They did not have 5 hours. None of us do it ever on a Saturday, or $200 to $250 to go get certified in CPR just cause. And it's not because they were bad people. It's not because they're irresponsible parents. It's just the way our world works these days. We simply hardly have enough time to take care of ourselves and do everything we need to do, let alone do something like this that's sort of proactive and slightly morbid. It just doesn't occur to people unless, unfortunately, we're after the fact. I also looked very, very deeply into drowning statistics. My mother-in-law basically taught my daughter how to swim in her pool. My father lives at the beach. My wedding band actually has blue stones in it because my husband loves lakes and rivers and I love oceans, okay, which is very odd foreshadowing. And I know, with how the relationship of my life and what it would take to water. And then let's add that Pisces element in there, Dr. G. Okay. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's, a little bit of this is kind of hard to deny sometimes, but, I started to look very deeply into drowning statistics, and I was blown away. I had no idea that it was the number one killer of kids 1 to 4, the number 2 killer of kids 2 to 14. And that for every child that dies by drowning, there are 8 non-fatal accidents like Clay's. Wow. I had no clue, none. I mean, I knew Clay had been in 2 semesters of swim lessons. My husband's a triathlete. Like, we're swimmers, we're water people. Mm-hmm. And he fell in and he sank. So as a mom, I thought I was doing the right thing. I had him in swim lessons, right? But I didn't know that what I should really be doing is making sure the curriculum taught the children how to float on their back first. It's a skill that even you and I, if we could go on the Chesapeake Bay, something happens. Now, we would always be wearing life vests, but let's say that we weren't. And we can't tread water until the Coast Guard comes to help us. We all need to know how to float on our back, because we do not drown because we can't swim. We drown because we can't breathe. So that's why we drown. So we need to be able to flip on our back, float, and breathe. And that's the most critical skill.
And I think that's the biggest myth out there too, is that we think that this can only happen to people who don't know how to swim. And we think that if we just get our kids into swim lessons, that will help solve and resolve the issues. But like you said, I think one of the most unknown or little known facts about there is that they're not taught exactly how to float. And that's a critical tip and skill that I think every parent and every individual, every human being should understand how to do. And sort of back on the whole CPR thing. I mean, as a medical professional myself, and we talk about the importance of people understanding how to deliver CPR, but then we don't make it easy for them to do it, right? We require, like you said, like you got to go to an institution, make an appointment, get 5 hours of training on something, and maybe even get certified. When at the end of the day, even if you don't have a certification, we look at the Heimlich maneuver. I mean, we have YouTube videos teaching people how to do Heimlich maneuver. People aren't certified doing it, but having that important life skill and understanding how to save someone else's life, even if it's not fully vetted from a certification standpoint, can save someone's life and many people's lives.
Exactly.
Well, and I think what you're doing with CPR Party here and sort of, bringing it to people's homes and allowing people to not just understand the importance and facts and myths around why we might need something like this, but then teaching them the life-saving skills, on their time, in their home, in a friendly environment that is not judging them and doesn't require the hours and hours of training that our typical system allows. And I think that's really, really powerful. So sorry, I'm almost telling your story here a little bit, but
no, I love it. Thank you.
I love the model of the CPR Party. Tell us how that's been going.
Yeah. So, like I said, my background is in marketing and PR. And so I really kind of thought to myself, all right, for me, I wanted to, the bottom line is people weren't going to get certified. All right. So I also learned some statistics in terms of that we really only retain about 20 minutes of that 5-hour instruction course, was the reality. And the reality was that our friend who had done CPR, which is really what Clay's survival was attributed to, that also the hypothermia treatment. But really it was the bystander CPR that the doctors, short of saying it's a miracle, which they don't want to say, they said it had to have been this bystander CPR. Our friend did not know CPR. He did what he saw on TV. So clearly this was effective. Clearly something was better than nothing. I would much rather have people know something than nothing. Of course, we encourage people to go get certified if they would like to. And often after they come to a CPR party, they do get the bug and they say, I want to really know more. Now, the other part about this that I always communicate to people, because no fail, everyone will say, I just don't know if I would be able to act in that moment. Here's the deal. There are so many other, quote, jobs that go along in an emergency situation. And you might be the person doing that. You might go find out where the AED is. You might be the one talking to 911. You might be the one calming down the parent or relative or loved one or friend who might be going into catatonic shock. You might be someone, helping to guide the paramedics to the scene of what's going on. There are many, many, many elements to an emergency situation, and having it run smoothly and well before the paramedics get there. And that's what I tell people. Also, you might kind of get your wits about you. And if the person who is doing CPR is doing it well, they're going to get tired. And maybe you get yourself together and you are the person that takes over for that person and continues CPR while that other person takes a rest. So, there's multiple areas here where people can can participate. And that's a lot about what we talk about in the parties. I decided we don't need to reinvent the wheel. People are very familiar with the in-home shopping party concept. It's been going on for decades. Start with your Tupperware party and move on. We now have the skincare parties, the jewelry parties. I mean, the
Botox, right?
Yeah, Botox parties, clothing trunk shows, dorm room trunk shows. I mean, we've got it all. So everyone, there's a format. Boom. I don't have to educate anyone. They know exactly what I'm talking about. And I say, okay, replace the shopping with a CPR instructor. We'll be there for an hour to an hour and a half. It's an informal course. There's a lot of question and answer. We do sort of have a format where we make sure certain important points are met. They will all get their hands on a mannequin and do compressions on a mannequin. That's probably the most critical element, is that really that muscle memory and people realizing how hard they have to push. And two, which is so critical, is people getting in front of an AED and having a demo of an AED done. And if to anyone listening to this, that does not mean we were going to shock you. That is not what's happening. And an AED, by the way, will not shock you if you do not need to be shocked. FYI, it will not. People are very afraid. They think if they pick the thing up, it's going to shock them. No, that's not how it works. But we have our demo AEDs and people see what that's for and they realize, oh my God, that's not for the paramedics. That's actually for me to use. So I always get such a good feeling when I see people's eyes sort of open up when they see what an AED does. I mean, they don't even know what it is,
Yeah, we see them on the walls all the time, right? You walk through the airports, you walk through these public facilities, we see them there. We're glad that they're there, but what use of it is it if nobody knows how to use them?
You got it. And that's really, where we're, again, sort of getting into the future of my organization. But, I'm working with, I'm talking right now with the Pulse Point Foundation and about hopefully being a sustaining partner of CPR Party. They have an incredible app that they use where if someone is CPR certified, or they also have another sort of designation of someone who sort of knows CPR, is in the area, and you have put the app on your phone and you are willing to be contacted, you will get pinged that there is an emergency close to you via GPS, and you can run over and help them. So, really the AED portion of this is very, very unknown. And really such a big, big piece of this, and needs a lot more awareness, in addition to teaching people these critical elements of CPR. And like I said, one of the things I do really like about the concept myself is that it is a morbid concept. Okay. No one likes to think about being in these emergency situations, but unfortunately, obviously they happen. And no matter what, you could have the fastest paramedics in town. These incidences, there's 735,000 sudden cardiac arrests a year. Okay. We're talking seconds here that people need help. Unless there's a paramedic in the room, you've got to have some bystander help in those moments. And if people don't know, when you drown, you go in, you can't breathe, then you go into cardiac arrest. So that's why, the cardiac arrest is such a critical element here in what happens to get that oxygen going, keep that blood flowing to the brain. And then it's just staving you off until, the professionals get there. And with people, if they know something, they will be able to increase the outcome of this person's survival rate exponentially. If they know nothing and they stand there, nothing will happen and the person will die. Right.
I mean, your model here of, providing CPR training in people's homes and having sort of these gatherings around it has gotten a lot of, good coverage. Not enough in my eyes. I think it needs more, and I think we need to get the word out. But, obviously there's lots of challenges around this because we tend to be a very reactive society, right? Like, this could never happen to me. It'll never be in my scenario. Why should I put the time in? When that's certainly not the case, right? Like, you don't want to have to think about CPR training when it's too late. Especially when it comes to your own family, as you've experienced. And I think
we're not just, I want to stop you there. We're not just a reactive society. We are a judgmental society. It goes a step further. Not only will my child not drown, but to the people that do, it was their fault. Okay. They're a bad parent. That's where people go. And the reality is that is not the case at all. And people have such a hard time with the concept of that vulnerability of thinking, no, there's no way that's going to happen to my child. It can. And you mentioned something earlier, and I forgot to say it, which is drowning happens when everybody's watching and nobody's watching. Okay. Parties. I mean, there was a story a few years ago in Virginia. There was a pool party for a number of staff doctors at Children's Hospital, and a child drowned. Okay. I mean, this can literally happen to anyone. It's a second, it's silent. And again, it's when everybody's watching and nobody's watching. And so, there's a number of layers of protection, and we can talk about that more specifically toward the end, that go into, a fun and safe pool environment or, open water environment. It's really not hard to make things safe, but people just don't know and they don't think, and it's okay. But we really, like you said, the word really does need to go out. And unfortunately, one of the reasons why it hasn't gone out, and this was told to me directly, is drowning doesn't make anybody any money.
Wow.
Okay?
That's just
drowning
horrible.
Doesn't make anybody any money. Now, take that statement, and then let me tell you that 107 children died in Texas alone in 2016. That's 107 families that are done, okay? When I tell you my son lived and our family is nowhere near, quote, recovered, okay? The PTSD that everyone suffered, the learning issues that my own daughter suffered because she was unavailable to learn for first grade because she was suffering so much from PTSD. I mean, there's an Indian saying that I will butcher the translation, but essentially it is, when a child drowns, a family drowns. It could not be more true. Okay. So we now have major medical expenses you're facing, major therapy expenses you're facing, a community that's rocked, family and siblings that are in therapy, most likely for the rest of their lives. That's 107 families in Texas alone in 1 year. And by the way, here's the worst part. It's most likely even more, because there's no standardization of reporting, that the numbers that you see aren't even correct because there's no reporting standards for our data. So a child, unfortunately, could pass away 2 or 3 days later, say from pneumonia or heart attack, but we don't have confirmation that it's recorded as a complication of drowning.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So that number is definitely likely higher. Yeah. And like you said, the ripple effect from there, it's not just about the individual who may have passed away, but for like the statistic you mentioned before, for every one actual drowning, there's roughly 8 or so who are near drowning, non-fatal.
Yes.
And so those aren't accounted for, and then impacting the families. I mean, this number is amplified, multifold, beyond just 107.
Not to mention that drowning is the most expensive injury. Drowning is a $6.2 billion medical expense a year, and it is completely preventable. That's the thing that's so crazy about all of this. Like, my father died of lung cancer. I've done Cycle for Survival. I have raised money for that. I understand. You've discussed your father's Alzheimer's. There are conditions, there are things out there that we will raise and continue to fight for to get research. This is one thing that parents can say, I can do something about this. This is preventable. I can absolutely do something about this. And it can give us as parents in this crazy world filled with social media and everything else we have absolutely no control over when we let our kids out the front door. This is one thing we do. And it's really been sort of a black cloud on the pool and spa industry. And, they've been very afraid of it. They're starting to adopt it more, and they haven't quite figured out that safety does sell. Okay. But in my opinion, if marketing can make NFL players wearing pink cool, anything can be cool. Okay. Anything. I mean, never would I have thought the day would come ever when I was at RFK Stadium watching Redskins game with my, God bless him, my late father as a young girl. Would I ever thought I would see pink cleats on NFL players? Okay. So hopefully where I tried to really bring this back was this really easy concept of the CPR party. Let's lighten it up a bit. Let's take this. You and I are talking about some very deep, serious stuff here, and people don't always want to talk about that. All right, so let's just go over to a friend's house, chat a little bit about what's going on, sit down, take our little hour and a half course. You will not realize the sense of relief that you will have when you're done and go like, oh my God. It's like when you sit down at dinner, you didn't realize how hungry you were. And then you're like, I'm starving. It's the same thing. They sit down, and then when they're done, they're like, God, I am so glad I did this. They didn't realize how much they needed it until it was done. And then guess what? You go about either the rest of your afternoon, evening. I've had women do it during the day and they're right in the pickup line at 3:30, or at night they can have some glasses of wine and go about their business. Kind of just bringing it down, taking a little bit of the edge off of the subject matter, getting what we need done here in a reasonable amount of time. And it seems to be really hitting well. I mean, I sat with our national training partner, Rescue One. The president of Rescue One is Jeremy Grubber. And I sat with him the other day, and I said, have you heard from anyone, any feedback, anything negative? Is there anything that people have said? And he's like, no. And I said, really? Come on. There's got to be something that is, what can we do to improve this? He said, we've never had one negative comment about anything. So we're doing something right. It's just that we need some, like you said, we need some national recognition. We need some partners to help us financially, because we're pretty much doing this on our own. I'm just raising funds here and there to pay for these parties. And in order to make this scalable, we need some partnerships that are going to help us do that, both media as well as, again, the AED companies, people like that, to really help us spread this very, very simple, easy concept into homes all over the country, where we will be able to improve the lives and outcomes of so many people. And, I'll throw another stat out at you that an average 2-day hospital stay for cardiac arrest is $75,000. So imagine if you show up to the emergency room alive and basically just needing a checkup and an appointment with your cardiologist, or maybe you go into surgery, versus showing up to the emergency room half dead. The cost of that is exponential. And we all know what's going on in our healthcare system right now.
Mm-hmm.
Why this hasn't been addressed and looked at. And this was sort of my call to President Trump, because, I see him as a wild card. Hopefully he'll be interested in his grandchildren learning how to swim and knowing his family, knowing CPR, because as we know, cardiac arrest does not discriminate against anyone.
Mm-hmm.
This could be a massive, massive cost saver for our country.
I completely agree. And I'm sure there's a lot of my listening audience who are involved in this types of area who can help out. So I'm hoping those who are listening hear the call, being asked by Laura here. And if you've got some ideas or resources or partners or organizations who might be interested, we will, at the end of this conversation, share Laura's information where we can reach out to her and help her get the message across. I love the fact that it's just a grassroots effort at this point and looking for ways to scale. And I want to go back to this notion that you didn't quite describe it in these terms, but I sort of saw it in these terms, where you're ultimately creating the citizen paramedic. And it reminds me of a really cool story that I heard through a speaker over at TED Med, this guy named Eli Beer, who was a local citizen in Israel, and noticed the fact that when an ambulance was called,
his story.
Yeah, it typically took 30 to 45 minutes for an ambulance to arrive. By that time, the damage was done to the patient. They either didn't survive or ended up with serious complications. So he basically asked a simple question: is why can't we dispatch local citizens who are, may not be certified as a paramedic, but could essentially stabilize the patient until the paramedic got there. And I see you almost doing, and what they discovered was they were able to reach that patient in a matter of a couple of minutes versus 30 to 45 minutes. And that is simply the difference between life and death for many of these folks. And I almost see like what you're trying to do here in creating sort of the citizen paramedic. I mean, it could be your neighbor, who has at their local pool, who's experiencing an emergency. And it may take, like you said, drowning is a matter of seconds. You don't even have minutes, right? So it may take an ambulance 5 to 10 minutes to get there, whereas your neighbor might be right down the street, get pinged, no CPR, comes on over, and within a matter of minutes is, or even seconds, is conducting CPR. So I love this notion. I love the power of what it can achieve. And I hope everyone listening sort of gets behind this and checks out CPR Party and gets involved in how we can help. So incredible.
Well, especially too in rural areas, really, I mean, let me tell you firsthand that paramedics, firefighters, our first responders are some of the most amazing human beings on this planet. They are sure as hell better and more amazing than anybody I know, and myself included in that mix. These people are overworked, underpaid, and all they want to do is help. But they cannot get there on time. Mm-hmm. And if you're in a rural area, it is even more critical that the people around you and in your home, because 80% of these events happen at home, by the way, that you are equipped with some type of training, because it's impossible just for them to get to you. So yes, I love the concept like this. I love what you're saying, the citizen paramedic. That's a great catchphrase. It's really about helping your neighbor. And in these times where we do have, unfortunately, these events that occur, these terrorist events, different things that go on, we all really need to be able to bind together and help each other with these very simple skills.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So if there was one thing you wanted our listeners to take away from, like what is the most important tip that you would recommend to anyone listening?
In an emergency or in general?
Just, they're encountered. Let's talk, just specifically around drowning. Let's talk about, safety around swimming and pools and so forth.
I would give two things. I would say, one, you need to know how to float on your back, mm-hmm. no matter what. And then the second thing I would say is that there are water watcher tags and things. Take 20-minute shifts. Like, you watch for 20 minutes, hand the tag over to your friend. She watches for 20 minutes. For those 20 minutes, you're not on your phone, you're not doing anything, you're not talking to anybody, you're just watching the pool. Make it 10 minutes. It doesn't matter. Just have somebody who is dedicated to watching.
Great tips. So I know this was a real heavy conversation, but I think an extremely important one for everyone to hear. So with that, I think we'll share at the end, some resources and places that people can go. But I think this might be a good segue into sort of what I ask all of my guests, with sort of a Mad Lib lightning round where you get to fill in the blank of certain statements that I call out. So if you're okay with that, Laura, we'll start that.
I'm ready.
All right, good. So let's go with the first one. We've got, I think, 6 of them for you here. The first one is: the best piece of advice I ever received was...
This one is really easy, actually. One of my father's best friends, Greg Lewis, told me before I went to college, he said, and at the time, the college catalog of courses was actually a book, not online. And he said, that's disturbing, right? Get your college catalog. And he said, go through the college catalog and check every single course that is interesting to you. No holds barred. If, ballet on roller skates looks interesting to you, check it, okay? Anything that looks interesting to you. The whole course, page for page, every single one. When you're done, flip through it. Wherever the majority of check marks is, that's your major. For me, my major, it was public communication, baby, and it could not be more of a perfect career for me and what I do in a living. I mean, it's the single greatest piece of advice I was ever given. I did not listen to it until after I had to switch schools and had lots of fun at my original school.
That
at
yeah,
the University of
it's
Georgia.
so
But
funny. It's so funny you say that because I mean I didn't have a similar piece of advice given to me, but flipping through the books I remember at George Washington University where I went to undergrad. I was on path for medical school, but at the end of the day, I flipped through the catalog just like you did and started checking everything that was interesting to me, and everything was centered around poetry and creative writing, and ultimately that became my major. And but it's this great piece of advice. I love that one.
yeah.
All right, next one for you. I am most curious about.
Okay, this may sound strange. I'm most curious about knowledge, and what I mean by that is that I went through one of the best public school systems in the country here in Montgomery County, Burning Tree, Pyle, Whitman, and was totally undiagnosed ADHD, a couple LD things here and there. So what I didn't know I was doing was I worked the system. Okay, so I was a cheerleader and a pom, so I made sure that all of my teachers were coaches, and they wanted me to be able to cheer at the Friday night football game, so they passed me,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't factor to save my life, but they passed me anyway, And so actually it was after I majored in bartending and being in a sorority at the University of Georgia and ended up coming home and going to college at American University. And I started to take my education seriously that I was actually diagnosed with these things and started to work with the learning disability office there at school. So since that moment, when I learned that I wasn't stupid, because I thought I was, I have had a thirst for all things knowledge, anything and everything I could possibly get my hands on. I want to know. I want to be an expert in, because I feel that I lost so much. I felt I lost so much time. There's so much that I didn't learn that, I stay up at night. Like the rabbit hole that I go down on the internet is so random at times. It's unbelievable because I'm just interested in learning anything and everything I possibly can.
Yeah, I think that's great. And you know what? In life, you never stop learning, right? That's the beauty of it, which I love. Great. I like that one. All right. Next one for you. Looking back, what would you tell your 20-year-old self?
I would say, and this is something that's become really clear since my father's death this fall, is trust your instincts. They are all inside of us. We have spent many, many years what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of subduing our natural God-given biological animal instincts. They are there for a reason. If there's a feeling that you get that's uncomfortable, don't ignore it. It's telling you something. And most importantly, if there are people around you, regardless of whether they are family or close friends, people with those instincts, if you have an instinct that someone doesn't have your best interest in mind, trust it. It's probably true. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. It just means that maybe they're not the right person that you want to have in your closest world. And if I had known that, I would have trusted myself so much more in some areas of parenting and otherwise that I thought too much about what other people thought, and I thought too little of my own instincts. And some of that has to do with what I just mentioned before, the LD stuff, and thinking I was, pretty much an idiot for most of my schooling life, and then realizing I just learned differently. As soon as I put some different twist on the learning, all of a sudden I was learning, rapid fire. But I would say it's a cliche, but trust those instincts and put the people around you that they truly, truly love you and want what's best for you and your family. And you'll know those people. And the other ones, even if they're your family or friends, you got to keep them a little bit out of the inner circle, a little bit, just to kind of protect yourself.
I like that one. Trust your instincts. We tend to often overthink or outthink our gut reactions when our gut reactions are actually trying to tell us something.
Yeah, they are.
Really,
They're
really
useful.
important.
They really are, especially in a more of a dangerous situation. They really are there. They're there. You have to listen to them. They really are telling you. You have it inside of you. No matter what anybody tells you, you have that inside of you. It doesn't matter your role modeling. It doesn't matter your upbringing. It doesn't matter your education level. Those are there, and they were put there for a reason. Listen to them.
Yeah. Yep. All right, next one for you, Laura. If you had to write a book about yourself, essentially an autobiography on yourself, the title of the book would be?
It's funny. I actually have been asked this question before, believe it or not. And my answer remains the same. It would be called The Metro, Take a Ride on the Crazy Train.
Perfect. I love that one. So one day you're going to have to actually execute on that because I would love to.
Well, you'll have to help me because my ADD self can't do it alone. I need help.
All right, next one for you. If you could invite 3 people over for dinner, dead or alive, who would you invite and what would you want to talk about?
Okay. I can't limit to 3 people because I always have to go big or go home. Okay. There's no middle ground here with Laura Metro. So
all right. Who's your laundry list?
Okay. The laundry list is the first Steve Jobs. Okay. I want to talk to him about marketing from the soul, marketing. I want to talk to him about the brand and all of his business knowledge. I want to talk to him about building Apple, which is not, I mean, it's a brand, but it's building a culture, around a brand. I would love to just pick his brain on so many different things. Okay. So the next one, which I know you're going to probably laugh out loud. The Rock. Dwayne Johnson. Okay. I absolutely love this guy. Okay. I would fall over dead if I met him for multiple
I do too,
reasons.
actually. I never even popped it in my mind, but I do love him too. But tell me why. Go ahead.
He has the best attitude on the planet. He is the hardest worker you've ever seen. He is real. If you ever follow his social media feeds, I mean, he'll take you right into his house, right into his gym with him. I also am very interested in terms of his physicality and how he takes care of himself physically. Look, we all struggle with time. We've talked about this over and over in this discussion. And he finds a way to do multiple movies. I don't know if he ever sleeps and work out and exercise. And, so I very, very, very much respect his physicality, but his attitude and then his humor. He's hilarious. And you gotta have humor. If you don't have humor, you're never going to get
because of his authenticity and his attitude and his hardworking mentality. I mean, he is now the highest paid Hollywood actor. Which is pretty crazy.
He's really incredible. And I actually loved him before, but I became more introduced to him through a story called, a book called Renegades Make All the Rules by Amy Jo Martin. And she actually helped him cultivate his social media feeds. And I mean, it's incredible. Incredible.
Have you ever met him? Have you ever met him?
I would love to hang out with him.
All right. We're going to have to find a way because I would love that one too. All right. Who else is on your list?
Let's do it. All right. Confucius. The golden rule. Okay. I'd like to sit there and hear truly, we talked earlier in the podcast about having that crystal clear moment. I'm like anybody else. I can get caught up in things. I can get lost. I can get messed up in the ankle biters, the day to day. They can take me down, and I just like anybody else, I fall off the beam sometimes when I'm really trying to stay focused. And I admittedly yell at my kids, which makes me feel even worse because of what we've been through. Okay. So it's the double guilt trip, when life is hard. And so I'd really like to, sit with Confucius and hear what is to say on these things. My last being, I love music. So I would like to meet, actually I have 2 more things, but I would like to meet Pitbull and Robert Plant.
Okay. Explain.
Okay. I love all music. Led Zeppelin and Robert Plant are legends in my mind on so many different levels. And I truly want to hear what the 70s were like for him. I want to hear all of it. Pitbull, I love his attitude also. He comes from nothing. And he just seems to have a zest for life every single moment of every single day. And it comes out in his amazingly upbeat, amazing, fun music. And I would love to hear about his rise to fame and fortune and kind of, he seems to have an excellent attitude. And last but not least, my dad. I would love to sit with my dad again. And I would love him to be able to tell me.
So he seems like such a special
everything.
Person, but I see you write such, from the heart posts on Facebook in memory of your dad. And tell us a little bit about him, if you could briefly.
Well, it's interesting. My dad and I had a very up and down relationship, believe it or not. My dad, he and I are very much alike. We're passionate people, and Dad lived life. Now that resulted in 3 wives and and lots of good parties. He really grabbed life by the seat of his pants. If he was going to do something, he did it. And that caused some issues in the family, obviously. But at the same time, he was also an entrepreneur, and he really guided me in a lot of ways. And in the last 8 years of his life, we really put everything that upset us in the past, and we just lived and loved each other. And I mostly just felt like I didn't have enough of that time with him. And I wanted more. There was a lot of time I spent on my own, working through some of my own things. And, I just felt like I didn't get enough time of that father-daughter, that pure father-daughter relationship that I had had with him over the last 8 to 10 years. And I would like to, hear more, but I strive to find the balance between managing having a family and my responsibilities there with living life and to the fullest, and finding that balance. So I really thank him and attribute him for showing me someone who lived life to the fullest and would always do things. And I'm trying to sort of balance that out there.
Well, Laura, I love that list. In fact, there's a bunch on there that I hadn't even thought of before in the past, but I'm going to have to steal them for myself as well and put them on my list too. So really cool. I would love to be at that dinner conversation with you guys. I have got one last one for you. So on this podcast, we like to celebrate all the things that make us different, what make us unique, which really define ourselves. We call that being unusual. So how would you fill in the following blank? I'm unusual because.
This one was tough. But I'd rather go with something more honest and raw than go with something that's pretty. So I would like to say that I'm unusual because I'm broken. I am broken on multiple levels, and because of those breaks, because of those cracks in the armor, those scars, those are what I rise out of. And I try to be open about those cracks and those scars, but that's really what I'm made of. And that's really what drives me to do the things I do in my life, and to love as hard as I love, and sometimes to fight as hard as I fight. But to keep that passion for my friendships, for my family, for my work. And I would say I'm unusual because of all the elements that have broken me over the years, which are just mine. We all have broken pieces to us, but maybe the difference between me and the next person is that I stay the course, and I really try to take those breaks and do something with them, make something out of them.
Wow, I was not expecting that one. That is very powerful, and I can't think of a better way to end this conversation than on that note. So Laura, thank you so much for being on the show. But before we head off, like I mentioned earlier, for folks who want to get involved, help out, learn more about you, about CPR Party, hear your story, where would you direct them to go, and how best to reach out to you?
A couple places. Well, first, my website, which is thecprparty.org, to check it out. You can submit a form to do your own CPR party. And also, we recently, which I can announce here, have launched our peer-to-peer campaign. So we have some different fundraising options on classy.org that you can go and host your own party, either or raise money for an AED for your school, or do that. So you can check us out there. Another great resources for the listeners is Families United to Prevent Drowning. If you go on Facebook, we are a coalition. I'm one of the founding members. We are a coalition of all families, basically small but varying sizes family foundations, with one common goal: to stop drowning and entrapment. And all of these foundations have amazing tools that are often free to use, down childhood education to what we do, CPR Party, all kinds of amazing tools. So check that out, and check out all those organizations. We're all over the country. And last but not least, I am on the board of the National Drowning Prevention Alliance, NDPA. And we have our national conference next in Pittsburgh, April 10th through the 14th, where we'll be doing a lot of really amazing, groundbreaking stuff. And check that out as well. All of our members have incredible, often free resources for you to use.
Great resources for people to check out. Now, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you directly to maybe partner up or provide some additional resources or connections or even funding, where should they go? Is there an email that you can provide, or do you want them to connect with you on LinkedIn or submit via form on cprparty.org?
Well, I would love for them to follow all of my social media channels. Thank you very much. But the easiest way to get in touch with me would be Laura Metro at thecprparty.org. And Perfect. If you need me quickly, the best way to reach me is on text, 301-802-3655.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. Laura, it was such a delight talking to you, and very powerful story.
You too.
And hope to see you soon.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Hi again. It's me, Dr. G. If you are still listening, I'm hoping it's because you enjoyed this podcast. If you would like to hear future episodes, you could really help me out by subscribing to the That's Unusual podcast on iTunes and leaving a review. It goes a long way in helping me get the word out from avid listeners like you. As a thank you, I will be selecting one new reviewer each week at random for a free private 15-minute phone conversation where you can ask me anything and get professional advice on your career or business to help you stand out and make a difference. Also, if you want to be notified of any future episodes, please visit that'sunusualpodcast.com and sign up to receive updates on new episode releases. Until next time, remember to always think unusual.